All right, so now we're going to, now that we're done with skinning, we're going to move on and start talking about blend shapes, which are going to allow us to do a couple things. So blend shapes are a type of deformer that will allow you to create new shapes with geometry you already have. So for our purposes, we'll use them for things like creating facial expressions. So we'll be able to get things like eyebrow raises, we'll be able to blink our eyelids, smiles, frowns, and all that kind of stuff. This is going to allow us to have a property that we can animate or connect to a controller and again kind of animate or automate these facial expressions. We can also use them for corrective animation. So for example, if we were to take our foot controller and rotate it up, we wouldn't want that foot or the shoe to clip through our pant geometry. And what would probably more naturally happen is that front of that pant leg would probably lift up a little bit on top of the shoe. So we can automate corrective animation by using blend shapes and the connection editor, or I guess in this case set driven key. So we'll look at a couple uses for this. Before we do it or apply it to the character here though, let's open up a new scene. Actually, let me save real quick. And we'll look at blend shapes here on just a basic geometry first before we start applying them to our character. So I'm going to come up here and go to create polygon primitives, and let's make a sphere. And so there's a couple ways you can create a blend shape. We're going to start with sort of the old way of doing it first, just so I can kind of show you the process, and then we'll look at the new and improved way to do it through the blend shape menu, which I tend to prefer in most cases. The only thing we'll sort of actually use the old, sort of the legacy version of creating blend shapes for is our eye blink, because I feel like it works a little better for those purposes. But let's start here. So the way blend shapes work is you're going to have a minimum of two pieces of geometry for this to work. You'll always have the original, and then you're going to have what's referred to as the target geometry. So the target geometry is just a reshaped or remolded version of your original geometry, or it's usually referred to as the base mesh. So again, your original geometry is the base mesh, the deformed geometry is the target. And what this will do is it actually looks at your geometry the way it is. So if I were to take this sphere and duplicate it and pull it over, what it does is it sees that these geometries are identical in terms of their vertices. And so the way blend shapes work is they look at all the vertices on these geometries. Every one of those vertices has a name and a current position in X, Y, and Z in 3D space. And so what's important about our blend shapes is that you don't actually change the target geometry. And when I say change it, I mean you're not going to remove vertices, you're not going to add or remove edge loops. The actual topology, once we start creating blend shapes, needs to stay the same in terms of how many vertices are there. Again, because it's using the vertice placement in X, Y, and Z and the vertice names to actually create and control the blend shape. So my original sphere is here on the left. This is our base mesh. The one on the right is our target, and that's what we're going to morph the base mesh to. So let's take the target and start changing it. So I'm going to come in here on a vertice level and just start kind of sculpting on this. And so I'll just do that. I'm not going to do anything super fancy to this. And then what we need to do in order to create the blend shape is you need to select the target first, the base mesh last. So I'm going to select the target, which again is the one that we've changed. I'm going to shift select the original geometry or the base geometry last. And then with both of these selected, under the rigging submenu, I'm going to go to deform. And the first option we have here is blend shape. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that to create the blend shape. Now it looks like nothing happened, but if you go into Windows, Animation Editor, and in here you have the shape editor. If we bring that up, you're going to have the menu that kind of stores all the blend shapes in our current scene. So right now, if we look in this list, we have two things. We've got the overall sort of blend weight, or the blend node, and then underneath that you have the target. So you can have multiple targets on one blend shape. So if we wanted to apply more of these, we could actually have it blend between several different targets at once. But in this case, we only have the one target. And so this first value here, so this blend shape 1, again, this is sort of the overall blend shape. This actually controls the overall effectiveness of the subsequent targets. So if you had 10 targets and we took this all the way to 0, it would actually kill all the effect that all the targets below have on our base shape. So we can turn them all on or off using this one slider. Now I'm going to take that back up to 1, but we still don't see anything happening, and that's because the actual target, this P-sphere 2, is currently set to 0. Now if I take this slider up to 1, or gradually up to 1, it'll start to morph our base mesh into the target. So let's take this all the way up here to 1. Now if we grab this target, we can actually continue to shape it, and whatever we do to this target, it will automatically update on the base mesh. So if I were to come over here and go to vertex and start pulling these vertices around, it will update on our base mesh, like so. And again, if we come back to the slider and take it from 0 to 1, it'll blend between the two forms. Now we could keep doing this, so I'm going to take that target, which is just generically titled P-sphere 2, I'm going to take that to 0. Let's take our sphere now and duplicate it. So I'll do a Control D, and we'll pull over another instance, and let's do something else to this one. So I'm going to go to the top view. I'm going to turn off soft select, and I'm just going to start selecting some vertices here. Let's do that. That's fine. And then once we've shaped that up, I'm going to grab the target. I'll shift select the base mesh last, and then let's go up to deform and create another blend shape. And so you're going to have multiple blend nodes with their own targets here in the shape editor. And if I were to take this new blend shape and take its target up from 0 to 1, it will start to create that shape. Now, again, like I said, it will average between multiple targets. So if I take this one up and then go to the other target, so P-sphere 2, it'll kind of morph between the two, or try to blend the two differences between these two shapes. Or I guess targets, rather. So, like I said, this is sort of the old way to do it. They did an overhaul on the entire blend shape interface, so we no longer have to strictly do it this way. I kind of prefer the new way better to some degree. So let me go ahead and take these two targets and delete them. Now this is history based, so once I delete those targets, I can no longer update the shapes of these, but I can still use the sliders, and it's going to maintain or sort of memorize these deformers, even though those geometries are no longer there. Now, if you grab these blend nodes and with those selected, come up here and hit the delete button or the trash can icon, it will delete those blend shapes, and then those will no longer have an effect on my base mesh. Now, the other way to do this is to simply just create everything in the shape editor with a single geometry or your base mesh. So if I were to grab my base mesh and in the shape editor come up here and hit create blend shape, it'll make a blend shape node, but there's no target, so it has nothing to blend between. So now what we have to do is, again, still with the geometry selected and then with the blend shape node highlighted, I'm going to come up here and hit add target. And what this will do is it'll create a target, and to the right of the target we have this red edit button. Now it's really important that when we're creating target shapes this way is that when we start changing the topology or the shape of our geometry surface, this red icon needs to be turned on for this particular target that we want to affect. If this is turned off and I come over here and start shaping this geometry, we're not actually editing or creating a target, we're changing the shape of the actual base mesh itself, which we don't want to do. So let me undo this, and let me reselect my geometry, and here for this target, let me go ahead and hit edit and highlight that red, and then let's come over here and start changing this. So it's going to look like we're changing the base mesh, but we're actually not. We're creating a target. So if I do this, and then turn edit off, and then come over here and start playing with this, if we take the target to 0, it'll go back to our base mesh. I'm getting tongue-tied. And then if I take this closer to value 1, it's going to blend to my target. Now let's take that to 0. So we can still have multiple targets on the same object. So if I were to select the sphere, grab that blend shape node, and I guess let's just do the same thing we did earlier. So I'll go to the top view, go to vertex. I'm going to turn off soft select, and let's just grab some of these verts here. And we'll do that. Oh, actually real quick, before I do that, almost forgot. We need to create a new target first. So I'm going to select that object, I'm going to select that blend shape node, and we'll add a new target. And now it says edit. Now I can make my changes. So I told you guys, I did exactly what I told you guys not to do, and that was editing the base mesh. There we go. Now I can come over here and turn edit off, and then we can play around with this slider, and now we have a separate target node that'll give us this effect. And again, we have the other target, and what it'll do is it'll try to blend the two. So those are blend shapes. Let's go ahead and open up our scene file now. So set the project. Let's open up our rig. I need my secondary geometry back on. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a few facial expressions first. We'll do the eye blinks last. So you'll want to do this to your head geometry, and it doesn't matter if that head geometry is part of its own, if it's all on its own, or if it's part of your entire body. We're going to create a blend shape out of whatever geometry it's attached to. So mine is a separate or its own geometry, so I'm just going to select it, and then let's go up to Windows, Animation Editors, and we'll bring up the Shape Editor. And with my head geometry still selected, I'm going to hit Create Blend Shape. And then with this blend shape node, I'm going to rename it. And I'm going to call this Face EXP for expressions. And I'm going to leave that blend shape tacked on at the end. And let's just start with our first facial expression. So with my face or my head still selected, I'm going to hit Add Target. I'm going to right click and I'm going to rename this. So we're going to make a smile, a frown. We're going to do a brow raise so that we can actually raise our eyebrows, and then we will do our blinks last. So let's go ahead and set this up. So this is going to be our smile. So let's name this smile. Actually, I might label everything with our prefix kid. So I'm going to call this kid underscore smile underscore TGT for target. Let's come up here and call this kid face expression. I might actually abbreviate blend shape just so this doesn't get really convoluted down here. So I'll call it BLND. Kid face expression blend, kid smile target. And then again, it's really important that for our target, it's currently selected at edit, or edit is highlighted in red. And then let's come in here and actually adjust the or sculpt the geometry. So with the smile, what I like to do is maybe grab a vertex here in the corner of the lip. We're going to want symmetry turned on, so I'm going to double click on the move tool. I'm going to reset its settings, and then let's come here into the symmetry, and let's do symmetry object X. I'm going to hit B like Bravo to bring up the soft select, and then if you hold B and middle mouse click and drag left or right, we can control the fall off here, And so I do want a slightly larger radius. And then once we get this set up and going, I'm going to symmetrically edit a smile. So I'm going to just push that corner up like that. We might even push it back into the cheek a little bit, like so. Just whatever we can do to create maybe more of a natural smile. Once we've done that, we can kind of deselect it and see what it looks like here. Maybe even check it in smooth preview, which it looks like it was already in. And that's really all we have to do for the smile. Now, if you want to test this out in the shape editor, all we have to do is turn edit off since we're done editing this target. And then we can come in and adjust the slider. So if we take it to 0, it'll get rid of the smile. If we take it to 1, it'll automate the smile for us. Now, if you do set this up and you decide later that you don't like the mouth shape, you can always go back to the target and turn edit on. And then if we select the base mesh, which is now in sort of the target mode, we can come in and continue to change this on a vertex level. So I actually don't mind mine, so I'm going to leave it alone. But again, you can always update this. You just need to make sure you hit edit on the target before you start doing it. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm also going to take this blend shape back to 0, and then we're going to build in the next blend shape, which is a frown. So let's go to object mode. Let's select the face geometry. Over here in the shape editor, I'm going to select that kid face expression blend, and let's add a new target. And then let's right click on the target and rename it. And I'm going to call this kid underscore, let's call this frown underscore TGT for target. I'm going to make sure edit is highlighted in red for this target. And then let's go back here into a vertex level. Let's just grab one of the vertices here in the corner of the mouth. And let's push it back and down. And maybe even rotate it a little bit. I'm going to rotate it down in Z. And maybe back in towards the cheek a little bit. We can maybe grab some of these vertices here in the center and pull them up. And so I would just kind of play around with this a little bit. Looks nice and frowny. Let's go ahead and turn edit off and slide here to see what it does. And then, like I said earlier, we can always blend these. Now, it might be a little weird or strange to blend a frown and a smile, but you can do it. I just don't know if you'll necessarily get the effect you want, but they should work in conjunction or try to blend with one another if we play with these. Let's go ahead and just kill the effect of both though. So I'm going to take those both to 0. I'm going to hit Control S to save just so I don't have to do that again. Now these should also work with your controllers. So if I were to turn the smile on and then grab the jaw controller and rotate it, he'll kind of smile and open his mouth at the same time. So those should both function with one another. Let's zero that jaw controller out. And again, let's take the smile back to 0 for that target. And then let's build in the last shape, which is our eyebrow raise. So I'm going to grab the face geometry. And then let's grab that kid face expression blink or blend shape node. Let's add a new target to it. Let's call this one kid brow ridge underscore TGT for target. And then I'm going to right click and go to vertex mode, and I'm going to start grabbing these vertices around where the actual brow ridge or on the face would be. So it's going to be some of these vertices right around in here. So this is probably this is one of the benefits of having proper edge looping, is that you should naturally have some type of brow ridge here in your edge loops that we can grab. And then with these selected, I'm going to just pull them up. And then I might, to get kind of an arc in this brow raise, I'm going to deselect the vertices here on the far left and the ones here on the far right, and then continue to raise this up. You might even play around with the soft select to get less of a fall off. And then again, continue deselecting. We might have to actually turn X-ray mode on. And then I'm going to continue raising that up like so. And I'm just going to kind of tweak this a little bit. And then it may not look like much is happening. If we really want to see this, what I'm going to do is turn the wireframe on. So I'm going to turn the wireframe shaded mode on. And then if we come over here and play with that slider, actually let's turn its edit mode off first, and then adjust the slider, we should get this type of effect. So we can have him raise his eyebrows, or I guess in this case his brow ridge. Now with those eyebrows, we would have to animate them separately. We could either set up a blend shape just for those, or we could just animate them on their own. I am going to set up a blend shape for them. Now I'm going to try to do this a little differently than I did in the last class. So if I were to animate them or to create blend shapes with them the way they are now, I actually have to create an entirely separate blend node for each individual geometry. So kind of going back over here to the shape editor, we have the blend node and then the 3 targets underneath. I would actually have to create one of these nodes for each eyebrow. I'm going to try to combine these real quick and see what that does for us. So let's save real quick. I'm going to grab both eyebrow geometries and let's do a let's go to the mesh menu or modeling menu. Let's go to mesh, combine, and then I'm going to take that combined mesh and go to edit, delete by type, history, modify center pivot, and modify freeze transformations. And then let's see if this works better. So I'm going to grab those eyebrows and let's create a blend shape. And I'm going to name this blend shape here while I'm here, I guess. So let's call this kid eyebrows underscore BLND for blend shape. Let's select that again and add a target. Let's right click and rename it. And I'm going to call this kid brow raise TGT for target. And then let's right click and go to vertex mode. And because we combine them, our symmetry is now working. And then before I actually shape these, I actually want the blend shape or the target for the brow ridge raise up, so I can actually see where I want these to be. So let's come over here where it says kid brow ridge, and let's take that up, and then let's start shaping our eyebrows. So this might actually work a lot better than what I did in the last class. Let's go back to object mode. And then let's test this out. So I'm going to turn that edit mode off for this target. And then if we scrub through this, yeah, I think that's going to work a lot better. Now, we have individual control over this, and ideally, if we edit the brow here, the brow ridge, it would be nice if these came along with it. So we're going to set up a controller here in a little bit where it will automate both functions for us at the same time. Now, just for the time being, I'm going to take the targets here, I'm going to take their weights to 0 so that there's no effect. Let's do a Control S to save, and then let's finish up here by doing the eye blinks. So the eye blinks is a little tricky, and again, we're going to use sort of the legacy mode or the legacy version of setting up blend shapes in order to create this. So in order for this to work, I'm going to need a duplicate of my head geometry. And again, even if your head is attached to your entire body, you're going to have to duplicate that entire geometry. So mine, again, it is its own geometry. I'm just going to select it and hit Control D to duplicate it. And then because my head is skinned, the duplicate actually has all of its attributes automatically locked out for us. So the translates, the rotates, and the scales have this gray bar next to them indicating that they're locked. Now if you want to make absolutely sure that we're doing the duplicate head and not the original head, it might be best to open up the outliner and scroll all the way to the bottom and make sure it's the geometry here at the very bottom. Your original one should probably be higher up in the hierarchy up here. So there's the original at the very top. The duplicate is all the way down here at the bottom. So I'm just double checking, making sure the duplicate is selected. And then over here in the outliner, let's highlight all of these attributes. Right click and go to Unlock Selected. And then let's yank this over, like so. Before I do anything else, I want to modify, or I want to delete its history, and then I want to center its pivot. So with this object selected, let's go up to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Let's actually do Edit, Delete by Type, and just tear this out. And I'm going to do History, Non-Deformer History Channels, Static Channels, Constraint, Motion Paths. I'm actually just going to go down the list here, just on this geometry. And you want to make sure it's Delete by Type. If you do Delete All by Type, it deletes everything in the scene that has history, and so that could ruin your rig. So just make sure you specifically do Delete by Type. Let's close that, and then let's select this again and go to Modify Center Pivot. Now, the one thing I'm not doing, I'm not going to freeze its transformations, because what will happen is if we freeze the transformations on this duplicate head, when we actually blend between the two shapes, my original base mesh or the original face will actually tear off of our rig, and it will assume the exact position that this one is in. So I'm not freezing its transforms. Now, the way I like to set this up is in a split panel view. So let's set this up. And then I'm going to temporarily just hide the outliner here. And then on the left side, I'm going to go to Perspective, or I'm sorry, Panels, Perspective, New. And then I'm going to set up this new camera to look at the base mesh, or the original face. And on the right side, I'm going to adjust or edit the duplicate face. This way, I can adjust the vertices on the new face while I'm looking at what it's actually doing, or how this geometry is overlapping the eyeball geometry itself. And then let's actually set up the blend shape. So I'm going to grab our base mesh. I'm sorry, not the base mesh. I'm going to grab the target geometry first. I'm going to shift select the base mesh last. And with both of those things selected, let's go up to Rigging, Deform, and I'm going to open up the blend shape menu here real quick and go to Edit and reset its settings, and then hit Create. And then in the shape editor, let's go ahead and name this. So I'm going to right click and let's rename the blend shape itself. I'm going to call this kid underscore eyeblinks underscore BLND for blend shape. And then underneath that, I'm going to name the target. So let's rename the target kid underscore eyeblinks TGT for target. Now, the way we're setting this up, again, sort of doing the legacy way, we don't actually have to hit edit. We do not need to turn edit on because we have the actual target that we can see here, the duplicate geometry. So all we need to do is take the slider here for the target, take its weight all the way up to 1, and then as we change the target, we will see it update on the base mesh. So I'm going to minimize the shape editor for now, and then let's just double check to make sure this is working. So I'm going to right click and go to vertex mode, and whatever I do to the target, cool, automatically updates to our base mesh. So now let's start selecting the vertices that go along the upper eyelid ridge. So that's that kind of edge of the eyelid. And I'm going to select these all the way up to right before the corner of the eyelid. So I'm going to go through, and as I'm selecting these, I'm going to hit B real quick. I'm just going to leave soft select off for the time being. And then I'm going to select these vertices here too. So I'm just selecting a set of vertices here on the eyelid ridge. Now, with the way that we need to adjust this, we would want the eyelid as we sort of resculpt or redefine it here on the target. It would be nice if we could have them kind of rotate like we would expect them to naturally, and that would be around the eyeball shape. So if I leave my pivot point where it's at currently, that's not really intuitive to how an eyelid would rotate. So we want this to actually rotate from the center of the eye itself. So let's undo that. And what we want to do is update our pivot point. Now, before we update the pivot point for our rotation, there's one other setting that we want to adjust. And so what I'll do here is double click on the rotation tool. And there's this option called Pin Component Pivot. Now, before I select this, I just want to show you what's going to happen to the pivot point, normally when this is off. What it does is it updates your pivot point on the fly, so anytime you're selecting something, it kind of looks at everything you have selected and it averages the center point of axis based on the things that you have selected. So right now it's centering my pivot based on these individual components that I have selected. If I start to deselect things, you can see that pivot point changes each time I deselect. And what it's doing is, again, is it's averaging its pivot point based on my selection. Let me hit Control Z a couple times here to go back to my previous selection. Now, before we start rotating this, or before we start changing the pivot point, instead, let's go ahead and turn on Pin Component Pivot. What this does is it will pin that pivot, and so no matter what I have selected, it's going to remember where my pivot's at. So now let's close our tool settings. And then let's come over here and update the pivot point. And I'm going to do this from the side view here. And what I'll do is hold the D key. And I'm going to push this back and down. And I'm kind of imagining this pivot point as if it were in the center of the eyeball. So wherever that center of the eyeball would be. And once we get that in place, then we should be able to get more of a natural rotation from the hood of our eye, and it's going to give us more of a natural hood blink for that upper eyelid. Now, I do want the upper eyelid, I want most of that geometry to kind of come along with this. I don't want just the eyebrow ridge. So let's also turn on soft select. So I'm going to hit B to bring up soft select. And then real quick, let's double click on our tool again. And then underneath the soft select option, I want to change the fall off mode from volume to surface. And then let's go back and adjust our fall off here. I might actually select one more set of vertices here along the upper eyelid. And then let's rotate these down. And what I'm doing here is, as I'm rotating this down, I'm looking at what's happening here on the original geometry. And what we're trying to accomplish here is sort of a straight line going across as this upper eyelid closes. And I'm kind of looking at the corner of my eyes, and once this rotates down to a certain extent, I'm going to start deselecting vertices here. And then once I get those sides deselected, I'm going to continue rotating down, and then we'll deselect, and then rotate down. And actually, that's pretty good. So that's creating that that sort of straight line all the way across with my upper eyelid. Now I do want to maintain sort of the uniformity of my edge flow. So, with natural edge flow, you should have natural curves and arcs and things going like that. But I have this problem up here. with this vertex got kind of off, so I'm going to rotate that back up without soft select turned on, just so I can start to maybe straighten this out a little bit and get a more natural arc or curve here. So you do want some type of even distribution here in your edge loops. And so what I mean by that is if, let's say if we had all of these selected, if these were all the way up here, we're sort of losing that even distribution in the edge looping that we have in our quads. And I would want to come in now and select these and kind of pull them down so we get that kind of average there. Now you could, if it's easier, you might be able to manipulate these with the move tool and just kind of move things around. You may even use the under modeling, mesh tools, sculpting. You might even be able to use the sculpting brush and kind of sculpt this a little bit, but with my character, the edge loops are actually planned out pretty well, and I don't think it's necessary. But might pull that down just a little bit here. And then let's do the lower eyelid, and it's going to be sort of the same thing. So I'm going to start grabbing these sets of vertices here along that eyebrow or that eyelid ridge. And I'm actually going to grab that corner there. I'm not going to grab the corner here on the inside because that's actually, it's pretty close together there already. So I'm not going to mess with that at all. I'm going to take my current eyebrow or eyelid ridge and I'm going to rotate it up. And again, kind of look at what's happening over here. Might even, I'm going to turn my smooth view on. So I'm going to grab the original geometry and hit 3. And let's come over here to the right side and continue. And I just want to continue rotating this up until the eyelids start to kind of touch each other. And once those areas kind of touch each other here, I'm going to deselect those corresponding vertices. And then continue rotating up. And deselect. I might turn on X-ray mode there just to make sure I actually deselected those. And then continue rotating this up until our eyelid is closed. Now, this is kind of one of those areas where I think I actually didn't even have soft select turned on, and we've lost the sort of the averaging between our quads. So I'm going to come over here and start grabbing some of these vertices by themselves. So we no longer have that eyelid ridge selected. And let's grab these and start rotating them up. And then gradually deselecting some of these here in the corners. And rotate these up a little bit. Again, to get back our nice even quads. So something like that. Now, this part's really important. Let's actually save real quick. We want to test this and look at our base mesh to see what's happening as we go between the blend shape. So I'm going to take this target here and scrub through it. And what I'm looking for is any type of penetration with the eyelid. So does the eyelid actually go inside of the eyeball and the eyeball is kind of sticking out at any point? It looks like we did a fairly good job of setting this up. Let me turn my wireframe mode on and just test this real quick. This went a lot better than it did in the previous class. In the previous class, my eyeball did kind of poke through the eyelid about halfway through the blend here. So somewhere right around in here, the eyeball was actually protruding outside of the upper and lower eyelid. If that's the case, what you can do is come over here and start grabbing vertices. And I might actually turn soft select on here in just a second. But what you might do is grab some of these vertices and with your translate tool, just kind of push them forward a little bit and you can watch it update. So I would find the exact moment in your blend shape where you have intersecting geometry. So if your eyeball is sticking outside of your eyelid, and freeze or get to that point in the blend shape and then go over to your target and start pulling those vertices forward until you no longer have the intersecting geometry. So I might be able to pull out the eyebrow ridge here for the lower eyeball a little bit because it is starting to kind of go a little bit inside the eye. So let me find those vertices here. And maybe turn on X-ray mode. And then with that eyelid ridge selected, if I start pulling that forward on the target, over here it should start to pull out a little further away from the eyeball. And then don't worry about this. So if you look at my target, we do have intersecting geometry and we have this kind of weird vertice just kind of penetrating the upper eyelid. As long as it looks okay in your smooth preview on your base mesh, that's all that matters. So you don't necessarily have to fix this as long as it looks okay on your smooth preview on the base mesh. I might just push that in ever so slightly though. And then so let's just test this out one more time. So after I update it, I like to go back to the blend shape and let's make sure it looks okay, open and closing. And then as we kind of scrub through this, at any point, is that eyeball geometry penetrating our eyelids? And if so, how do we correct it? So it looks like it's working okay. So I'm going to hit Control S to save. Now, if we want to clean our scene up, I'm going to switch back to our main perspective over here. We no longer need this head over here once we set up this blend shape. So I would recommend double checking, make sure your eyeball looks okay, and as long as everything looks okay, we can delete this head. Now do keep in mind at this point we can no longer update our mesh, so you do want to make sure it's okay once before you delete that shape. And so let's see here. What else do we want to do? Before we move on to the corrective blend shape, let's actually set up a controller for this. So I'm going to grab the head controller up here at the top, and I'm going to start adding some attributes to it that will allow me to control and animate these blend shapes without coming into the shape editor. And I guess I'll mention that right now while we're on the topic. This part of the rig is not required. So you do not have to set up controls on the head control here to animate the blend shapes. It's perfectly acceptable if you want to animate these blend shapes in the shape editor. So you can animate and key them directly out of this menu. I just find it's a little more intuitive if we have these on a controller that we can select and animate. So this isn't required for the final project. But in case you want to know how to set this up, I'm going to grab my head controller. I'm going to come over here and select just one of the attributes. It doesn't matter which. I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to go down to Add Attribute. And with this attribute, I want it to be a float. So it'll go between a value of 0 and 1 and every decimal in between. And then let's go ahead and start naming our attributes. So I'll start here with our first one. We'll just call it Smile. And let's have it go from a minimum of 1, a maximum of 0, default of 1. And I'm going to hit Add. Let's see, let's do a frown. So I'm going to call this one Frown. Minimum 0, maximum 1, default 0. And hit Add. Let's see, what else do we have in here? Let's do brow raise. And again, minimum 0, maximum 1. Hit add. And then let's do eye blink. We'll call it eye blinks. Minimum 0, maximum 1, and hit add. And so we've got smile, frown, brow raise, eye blinks. Let's go ahead and close this, and then let's look at setting these up using the connection editor. So I'm going to reselect that head controller. I'm going to click on just one of those attributes that I just created, and let's go up to Edit and open up the connection editor. And by default, it should automatically load your head controller on the left. And if we scroll all the way down, we should have those new attributes that we just added. In case it's not over there, you can just grab the head controller and hit reload left, and they're right there. Now, we need to be able to select the blend shape nodes in order to get this to work. Now, to select those, you're actually going to do that here in the shape editor, and it's this primary blend shape node that's at the top of each of these hierarchies. So if I want to start connecting the smile, I'm going to have to select that kid face expression blend shape node here at the top. I'm going to right click on it, and let's go to select blend shape node. And then with that blend shape node selected, I'm going to hit reload right. Now, all of these are coming from the weight of their respective target. To get to that in the connection editor, I need to go to weight and click the plus symbol to the left. And inside the weight, you're going to have each target that we created. And so at this point, I just need to connect the smile to the smile target. So I'll go ahead and hit smile target, and it's going to connect it. And then if you notice over here in the blend shape editor now, that kid smile target has a yellow box, just indicating that it's been connected to something else in Maya. In this case, that attribute on our controller. And then at this point, let's just go through the list and start connecting the rest of our targets. So I'm going to click on frown, and then I'm going to click on the frown target here on the right. I'm going to click on brow raise, and I'm going to click on the brow ridge target. Now, the brow raise it's a little more complicated because we had to set up multiple blend shapes in order to get it to work. Because again, we have the brow raise on the face itself. We also have the eyebrows that we have to, we want them to animate with this same attribute. So I'm going to leave this brow raise selected here on the left, but now we have to actually select the blend shape for those eyebrow geometries. So over here in the shape editor, I'm going to select that kid eyebrow blend shape node. I'm going to right click and hit select blend shape node. And then in the connection editor, let's hit reload right. Let's open up the weight. And then let's connect it to that kid brow raise target. And then the last thing we have here is our eye blinks. So I'm going to select the eye blink here on the left, or the attribute. I'm going to come over here to the shape editor and right click on the eye blink blend shape node. Let's hit select blend shape node. Let's reload it to the right. And then let's open up its weight and then connect the eye blinks to the eye blink target. And that's it. So if I close this, and then let's grab our controller up here. And then if we start adding value to any one of these, we should get that blend shape. So there's our smile, there's our frown, there's our brow raise. And because of the way we set this up, now it looks a little more natural, and we're able to animate the eyebrow raise with our eyebrows following along with just one attribute, instead of having to come in here and animate both sliders independently from one another. So that makes that a little nicer. The eye blinks we'll get from there. And again, because they are blend shapes, we can blend between multiple. So if I wanted, I can get the you might have to be careful with that one because it's blending the eyebrow raise along with the eye blink, so now the eyes aren't completely shut. So that one we might want to be careful with. And then we've got the frown or the smile. He looks incredibly high right now. Let's see. Let's turn that wireframe back on. And let's just zero these out. And those should go back to default. Now, because of the way we've done this, actually let me turn these all on again real quick. Because of the way we did this, we connected those controllers or those attributes to the targets. I should be able to kill these just by taking the blend shape node here. So this is sort of the overall weight. If I were to take this to 0, it should actually kill all of these completely. So we still have control over these using the primary blend shape if we wanted to. But again, I've created the controller up here with these attributes. I might as well use them. So like I said, it's pretty quick to set up once you get it figured out, but I'm not going to require it for the final assignment. The last thing we'll do here for blend shapes is the corrective blend shape. So let's look at setting that up. And for this particular rig, I'm going to set it up on the cuff of my pant leg down here. So what I would like to do is I would like to automate a corrective blend shape so that when I take my foot controller and rotate it up like this, instead of having the shoe geometry intersect or penetrate the pants, I would like that front part of the pants to just automatically raise up with this foot rotation. Now, with that in mind, I want this to be automated with the joint, not the controller. So it is really important that we set this up using the joint and not the controller rotation. So we'll set that up in just a second. We need to create the blend shape first. So I'm going to select my geometry, and because it's all one piece, I do have to create this blend shape using my entire body. If you have just a separate geometry for the pants, you would only do this on the pants. But let's go ahead and select that geometry that our pants are a part of. With that selected, let's go ahead and under Windows, Animation Editors, Shape Editor, let's create a new blend shape. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new blend shape node. And I'm going to right click on this and rename it. I'm going to call this kid left pant BLND for blend. And then I'm going to create a target. So I'm going to select this and hit add target. Actually, let's call this pant blend. No, I'm going to leave it at left pant blend, because we might actually have to create a separate one just for the right pant once you get to it. So I'm going to select this and hit add target. I'm going to rename this target while I'm here. So we'll call it kid left pant TGT for target. I'm going to make sure edit is left on. And then before I actually start building in my target, let's actually just rotate the foot up real quick until we get the intersection of the geometry. So something like that. And then let's grab the pants geometry. I'm going to do this in low res with X-ray mode turned on. I'm going to right click and turn on my vertex mode. I'm going to go up to show and just turn the joints off temporarily. And let's start selecting these vertices here. I'm going to turn on soft select. Oh, I did this in the last class. So my move tool is way up here because it's we still have that pin pivot point turned on. So let's double click on the move tool and just turn that off. So here it says pin component pivot. Let's turn that off. Let's minimize our tool panel again, and let's pull this up like so. I'm going to hit 3 to go to smooth preview just to see what that looks like. I might pull it forward a little bit. And then if we wanted to, we could maybe smooth out sort of the transition here a little bit. So we're just kind of sculpting this up with our selection. I'm going to grab these and just pull them down a little bit. Like so. And that's our target. So if we were to blend with this, so I'm going to take that target weight and just see what that's doing. So that's the blend shape. Now we need this to be automated so that when that joint reaches this particular degree, it will automate this motion for us. So we're going to use set driven key. Now, if we're not sure what axis is actually getting rotation on that joint, let's go up to Show, turn our joints back on, and I'm going to grab that joint for the ankle, and let's actually see what's causing this. So it looks like it's Rotate Z. So I need the Rotate Z of the ankle joint to dictate the corrective action on this blend shape. So let's work backwards on this. I'm going to take that blend shape, or that target for that blend shape, and I'm going to turn Edit off. I'm going to take its weight and put that all the way up to 1. And so that when that foot rotates up, that cuff is already up. Let's grab that joint now. I'm going to click on Rotate Z to highlight it in the channel box, and let's go to Edit. Let's go down to Set Driven Key. And what we need is the ankle joint to drive the blend shape. So I'm going to load that ankle joint as the driver. And then while I'm here, I guess we might as well select the ankle joint here in the left column. In the right column, now that we know it's the Rotate Z that's driving this function, we're going to select Rotate Z here in the right hand column. And then we need to load the blend shape. So over here in the shape editor, I'm going to grab that left pant blend. I'm going to right click and do select blend shape node. And then in the set driven key dialog box, let's hit load driven. Let's, on the left column, grab the blend shape. On the right hand column, let's grab the target. So here's the kid left pant target. Let's highlight that. And then with everything set up the way it is, I'm going to hit key. And then what we need to do is adjust everything so that it's sort of at a default. So I'm going to grab the foot controller and zero it out. And when I zero that out, it should update the rotation of that ankle joint. So if I select the ankle joint, the Rotate Z is now 0. And then let's take the slider here for my left pant target, and let's take that to 0. And then let's just make sure everything is still selected here in the set driven key. So the ankle joint is selected, Rotate Z is still selected, the blend shape is selected here on the left, the target is selected on the right, and then with everything still selected and set to sort of their default position, let's go ahead and hit key. And what this will do now is blend between the two. So if I were to select my controller and rotate this up in Z, as we're adding Z rotation to the joint, it will automate this function for us. So we don't even have to animate this. It just does it on its own. Now, you could have further control over this by using the animation graph editor. So if we want this pant leg to not start rotating at this point, so when, let's say when the ankle joint is at 12 degrees of rotation, maybe we don't want the animation to start yet. We can actually use the graph editor to change this. So I'm going to bring this up just a little bit here. Oh, let's grab the foot controller and just rotate it up a little bit. And then, so I don't want this to rotate the pant leg up at 14 degrees just yet. I want a little bit of hold in its default position before it starts blending to the actual target. So let's go back to the shape editor. We're actually done in set driven key, so I'm going to close that. In the shape editor, I'm going to right click again on that pant leg blend node, and let's go select blend shape node. Let's go to Windows, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. And then on the left hand side, you have the target, the left pant leg target, which we just set keys on using set driven key. And this is visualizing to us on the curve the blending that it's automating for us as that ankle joint goes from 0 degrees to whatever angle it was at when we set up the blend shape. So if I were to come in here and grab these keys, right click and hit break tangents and make them weighted tangents, I can grab this first key and take its handle and add more hold on it. So the further I pull this out, and we might even take this last key down here and make it a little more linear. Now I can add more value in the rotation for this joint before it's willing to blend this target. So you'll notice now it waits a little bit and then it will start to do the blend shape. So we can have a little bit of control in terms of when this happens. Let's zero this out. The last thing we want to do to clean this up is, when I select the left foot controller and rotate this up, it should not be affecting the right side of my geometry. So now what we want to do is, let's select that blend shape here. Let's select our geometry, right click. Let's go down to paint. Let's go down to blend shape, and in here there should be a target weight node for your left pant. So any of the target nodes you have, it should populate here, and we want to select the correct one. So in this case, I only have the one target weight node, and it's the left pant blend shape target weight. I'm going to select that, and what's going to happen? It's going to highlight your entire geometry in white. And so what this is saying is this entire geometry is being affected by this left pant leg target shape. And so we can actually selectively paint out areas to no longer be affected by this. So if I were to take my brush and hold Control and paint over all of this geometry, and let's make sure we actually got inside this pant leg. And really, I just want this to happen on the bottom of that pant leg. So we could actually kill the influence that this has over our entire geometry. And so anything that's left white is being 100% influenced by this particular target that we selected when we right-clicked and went to Paint, Blend Shape, and then the respective target. And so anything that's black will get absolutely no effect. Anything that's white will be 100% affected. So again, like I said, we really probably don't even need the knee, to be honest. Let's paint that out. And that's it. And then so if I were to come down here and grab that foot controller and rotate that up, the only part of our rig that will affect is that pant leg. So this is how we would do an automated corrective blend shape. So a lot of times this is really useful for clothing. So you wouldn't actually use your skinning as a way to fix your clothing overlapping your foot or your hands or your wrist in some cases. You would actually want to automate this with a blend shape. Let's take this and zero it out, and we're almost done. So I'm going to hit Control S to save. And the last thing we need to do is clean up our rig. So I'm going to stop here, and in the next video we'll look at cleaning up the rig and finalizing it.